This is a restoration step I've been procrastinating about for a long time. I put the pre-monoblock carburetor on it. It originally had 2 angles. Then I put a single. Anyway, finally got to the right carburetor, which is a pre-monoblock 276. That is in, but it's got a velocity stack on it. And I have the air cleaner, and I think I have the right rubber connector to put it together. This is not a high performance or high horsepower bike, and I'm it's just for cruising around. So I would rather have it original, so I'm going to go ahead and try to put that in. When I first went to do it, I tried to ease it in, taking the battery out and kind of messing with different angles to get it in there, and there's no way it's going in without taking out something major. So I went back and looked at the shop manual, and lo and behold, it says step 1, remove the oil tank. So it looks like you get a free oil change every time you want to mess with the air cleaner, which is fine, not a huge deal. So I'm going to drain the oil tank, then remove it, and then get in there, see if I can get the air cleaner fitted properly, and then put everything back together again, put the oil back in the tank, and hopefully we'll be one more notch closer to original. Just a quick preview of how this job is going to go before I show you the whole thing. The service manual that I have, the brand new one that I thought was going to be real precise for this model, covers a bunch of years and a bunch of different types of air cleaners. So its statement that the oil tank had to be removed in order to install and remove the oil filter was incorrect for this model, for the D-type. I mean, it's correct. It says for the swing arm models, which this is not. So all my complaining that you'll hear about the access to the air filter being on the other side and the battery box seeming like it is the easier way to go is actually the easiest way to do it and the right way to remove it. And I'll get to that. It actually turned out to be really good that I took the oil tank off, because in the process I found that the filter component connected to the oil feed had come off inside of the tank, and I was getting gunk in through the oil system, mostly generated by the degradation of the timing sprocket or the magneto sprocket inside of the timing system. So it was good I found that, and I'm going to go through and vacuum drain the rest of the feed lines, because hopefully those aren't gunked up. But it was good that I came across that, so I don't mind having taken the oil tank off. But in the future, and I do have a problem with just the way this got put on and painted, it's really going to be difficult to get the battery box off. But the battery box is the correct way to access the oil filter, and I'll do that in the future, certainly. So you'll see that I do it the other way, but it turned out to be for the best. So maybe it's just this Thunderbird or the distance between the hard pipe and the soft one, but that I cannot get the lower part off. I've done it before, but I usually end up taking the whole bottom connector to the oil pump off, and I'm gonna have to do that again, because unless I drop the oil pump connector from underneath, the tubes are just too hard to manipulate and disconnect. I was hoping to get away without it, but as with a lot of British stuff, best way to do it is the hard way. Yep, because once you pull that off, the whole thing just drops right out. The breather stalk on the top gets stuck behind the back supports. So the only way to get that off of there was to drop all of that, and everything just came right out. So removing the connector to the oil pump from underneath was the best option. What a great opportunity to get back here and be able to clean out stuff that's, those hard to reach places. In the process, I checked all the assorted nuts and bolts that are difficult to get access to, and came across the fact that the tension adjuster had come fairly loose. The lock nut and the lock below on the I'm just going to call it the curved part, was still in place. So nothing was moving around, but the leverage tensioner was quite loose. So tighten that up, and I'll check everything again and check tensions afterwards too, but wouldn't have wanted that to come any looser than it was. So, nice opportunity to get back here and kind of clean everything out that you don't see that often, and tighten up some wiring and some other stuff. So just a little explanation of where things are going here. as with any good British motorcycle repair thing, there's a few things going off the rail a little bit, but the other part is just a rant I'll get to in a second. So the air filter holder is now in. I've got to drill the front mudguard because this is an aftermarket that came without that hole in it. Not a big shot because it came without the license plate holes too, and those, you know, you just drill as you need them. So I'll get that done. I had to move a little bit of the wiring harness, not rewire anything, but just shift where the harness was in order to get the other side of the air filter in, because this through bolt goes through the oil tank holder and into the stay for the air filter, and then through the stay for the battery compartment, which is fine. And it's my fault because I, you know, procrastinated putting the air filter in, so I wasn't really thinking when I used a bunch of the space up there for some of the wiring. But get that taken care of, not a big deal. Like I said, I don't have to rewire anything, just move things around a little bit. While I have the oil tank off, I'm also going to clean the oil filter element that's in the out port for it. While I was taking the oil pump connector off, the tinning let loose on the part between where it mates with the timing case and where that, it's just a chromed copper pipe, I think, tube comes out of it. So I won't have to re-tin that. It may turn out to have been the source of an earlier oil leak anyway, so that would be a good thing to do. But you know, just a typical, when you start with a British motorcycle repair, you don't always know where you're going to end. The plot continues to thicken. I removed the oil draw tube, and as you notice, if you know Triumphs, the screen's missing. So it has come separated inside, and what's worse, what made it down into that inlet is really nasty. So there's some gunk in there that has probably been reducing my oil flow. So again, the good news is we'll get that taken care of and we'll have much better flow overall, but yet another fun discovery in the course of doing it. I'm glad I found it, and I'm glad I can deal with it, but that was a surprise. So in terms of root cause, this is the base of the oil tank, which, you know, screws into the bottom of the oil tank and feeds into the tube that goes to the oil block and into the oil pump. The screen and the original part goes on the inside of that screw, and for some reason it must have broken off, and somebody tried to torch weld it onto, or, you know, solder it onto the outside of that fitting, which would have been fine, except that the heat was just given the color of this and the way it looks when it's all cleaned up after it came out of the ultrasonic, clearly deteriorated and became weak, so that the shake inside of the tank was more than it could handle. I've changed the oil a couple of times since I've owned it and had this screen out and cleaned it, but I think over time the vibration was just too much for the damaged screen after the heat hit it. So that's probably what caused it to break off. The new one, the new part has the screen that goes on the inside and is, you know, perfectly stable and well connected there. So we'll move on from there, but just don't be tempted to try to weld the screen back on if it comes off. I drilled the rear mudguard, and I put a rubber grommet between the air cleaner and the mudguard just to kind of protect it a little bit. I also found that a couple of dabs of grease on my finger to reach around and hold the washer and the nut in order to get those on with a little thread lock on the other side seemed to work pretty well, because I refused to take the rear wheel off just to get that nut in, but that seemed to work pretty well. Okay, so here's the shortcut question for the Triumph Nation. I had the magneto sprocket break down and inside of the timing case, took care of that, replaced it, cleaned everything out inside, changed the oil, cleaned all the oil out. Problem is, when I opened up the oil tank, the filter had fallen off at some point. I think after the main loss of the sprocket, but clearly there was gunk in there and enough to clog up, partially clog the outlet to the tank. So my oil pressure was a little bit low, not horribly low, but there was gunk in there. So here's the question. What do I do about the rocker feeders? I tried putting a brake bleeding vacuum on them and drawing back out through them, and I get no pressure. I mean, I can pull right down through them, which presumably is air at the top of the rockers. So it doesn't seem to be clogged. I'm not getting a vacuum there, but the question is, what would you recommend to clean those out? Do I run a lighter weight oil for a short period of time through them? Do I just run it normal and check them after a while and make sure that I got oil in the rockers just by checking the inspection caps? What do you recommend? I'm gonna put everything back together again because I think that's gonna be the direction, but the question is just what do I do and how concerned would you be about those little feeding tubes to the top of the head when you know you've had gunk in the oil? Fine gunk, but gunk nonetheless. Thanks. All right, all back together again. Oil tank reinstalled, air cleaner successfully installed. I wish I could say I was happier with it. This is one of those things that it's another notch toward original with the air cleaner in there, and hopefully the carb likes it and it runs a little better. But man, I really expected the air cleaner to be more visible. I don't know why. I expected that you'd be able to kind of know it was there. So only the most purist will you know, poke around and notice that from the top, I guess, that the air cleaner is there. Hopefully it runs better. Hopefully the carb prefers to have it there, and it's better for the engine and all anyway. But I can't say it was particularly satisfying update. Absolutely, it was worth every minute to find that oil problem, to find the missing, so that the screen had come loose, and repair all of that. I basically, I found a couple of little dings in the, you know, that could have been pinholes in the piping between the oil tank and the pump. So I cleaned all of that up, replaced it, replaced the tubing, and I think will be much more solid. May actually leak less, but the most important thing was that I got that crud cleaned out from the bottom end, and hopefully my oil pressure is going to be much better. So I'm looking forward to that. But other than that side benefit, I can't say that installing the original air cleaner was that much of a satisfying experience. But it's in there and we're good. So I'll let you know what's next. I think next is going to be the clutch cable, which shouldn't be a big deal, but I'm just replacing the clutch cable on the boot. At some point it was the original, and it's all kind of correct. So that's next.